Today on the Mr. Maple podcast, Matt and Tim count down the top 20 maples from the Mikawa family collection.
Konnichiwa, y'all. I'm Matt, and welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. We got a good one for you today. One of the most talked about topics, I'd say, in any of our fan groups or any of our Japanese maple places online. Everybody wants to talk about Macawa Yatsubusa. Today, that's what we're doing on the Mr. Maple Show. We're going to talk about Makawa's offspring. We're going to talk about some of our favorite Macawa Yatsubusa forms. And we kind of coined this term called the Makawa family. So we're kind of using that a little bit like the Go series. Today, we're going to talk about things in that Makawa family.
Hey y'all, I'm Tim. The Macawa Yatsubusa is a classic Japanese maple. It's one that was brought over and introduced in the United States by J.D. Vertrees in the United States from Japan, and it has a tightly layering compact habit. It was the very first maple of the year with the North American branch of the Maple Society. It's everybody's favorite tree. It's hardy. Its tightly layering habit gives this lively feel. It's lime green foliage. I mean, it's a plant that looks alive out there in the landscape. And it's a plant that everybody falls in love with as soon as they see it.
Yeah, guys. And if you haven't already, make sure to find us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to us. We also put these videos on YouTube under the Mr. Maple Show. So we're under both names there. And I think it's a fun topic for us to get into here today. We definitely love talking about all these different variations, whether they're variegated, whether they're different color variations or form and textured variations. There's a lot of things going on with Macawa Yatsubusa. You know, the OG Mikawa, it always shows up on everybody's list. Like, if you haven't followed our show for a while, we do a show on YouTube every Monday called Top 5. And what we do is we talk to people about their top 5 plants. And our most common question there is, what is your top 5 Japanese maples? And we've been asking that question long before we were a YouTube channel. That's something Tim and I have always asked people. When we meet our mentors, we meet Peter Gregory, we meet people in other countries, Masio Shiano. Whenever we get out there and we have people, we say, hey, what's your favorite Japanese maple? And this one answer comes up more than anything else, and it's Macawa Yatsubusa. And so today we're talking about all those cool variations. I mean, there's so many different weird ways to have a Makawa-like structure. The commonality between all these, they have that tight density to them, right? They all kind of have that bunchy, bonsai-like look that if you're not really that knowledgeable in Japanese maples, you're probably going to look at it and go, that's a pretty cool bonsai tree you got there.
So true, so true. And it's great for small spaces, great for containers. The Mikawa family collection, most people probably didn't even realize there were 20 of these. And we had to narrow down the list because we had so many. We had way more than the actual 20 that we're talking about today.
You gonna do some honorable mentions up front?
Sure, we'll start with some honorable mentions up front.
So these didn't even hit the list, guys, but we want to throw them out there. Makawa Cayenne. That's an introduction by Crispin Silva. Kind of a bronzing color to it. You know, it still has that Mikawa habit to it. Definitely want to get that one in the ground. I find it has better color in the ground and more color with a little bit of morning sun. Now, that could be true of a lot of the Mikawa forms with the color variants. They're a little better color, I think, in the ground.
Acer palmatum flying daggers. That is an introduction by us here at Area 51 Collection. It's a Chinese maple hybrid. And we thought it was going to be a lunar lobum. Turns out it has that tight, dense Mikawa structure. Mm-hmm. But we didn't include it in the Mikawa family collection because it is an Acer palmatum instead of an Acer palmatum.
Crazy the shape on this one. Long term, there is a massive one at Buckholtz Nursery. Stay tuned, guys. We're going to be doing a top 5 most outrageous plants at Buckholtz Nursery. I think you're going to want to see that one on YouTube. That's going to be a fun top 5. You'll have to tune in to see if Flying Daggers makes that list. It is a Pubi palmatum with Mikawa-like structure. I know Aaron Dragseth was just here. He did a top 5 with us not too long ago. He got one of those from us a while back, and his is Makawa out. To turn Makawa out into a term, it is Makawa out. That thing looks like a large, dense Mikawa lunar lobum with Osakazuki red fall color. Again, we're still figuring out if it keeps that always that Mikawa shape. All the older ones we have had, so it's kind of in that honorable mention category again.
Acer palmatum Nemo. This is an orange chance seedling that we got from Dr. Murray, and it has this just tight, dense habit and bright orange color. We put the name Nemo on it, named after the fish from Finding Nemo. And it's such an amazing, cool little plant. But
we had some of those people in person at our second open house or third, I forget, grab some of those Nemos. Those went really quick. We had people diving out of the cars and sending their kids to go get that Nemo. And that was the special. I was like, that was a pro tip right there. That guy, he pulled up, and before he even got out, he sent the 2 kids out to go get the Nemos. So I was like, that guy's smooth. I like the move there. So coming in here, before our list on that honorable mentions as well, Mikawa times Sharps. So weird name on that one. Another crisp and silver introduction. Not truly an exact hybrid between Macawa Yatsubusa and Sharps Pygmy, but it has retaining characteristics of both. So it kind of has a little bit of what you like about both. Macawa Yatsubusa shape, some of that foliage that kind of is reminiscent of Sharps Pygmy.
Another honorable mention we have is Acer palmatum Benny Makawa, selection by Tsukasa Maple in Japan, and it is one of the first variants with color interest on a Macawa Yatsubusa. Yeah,
Benny Makawa, pretty cool. Got in the U.S. through Fred Hooks. A little bit more orange than Benny. I mean, a lot of Benny can be different colors. I mean, you see that as a reoccurring term in Romanji. Typically, Benny means like a soft red. This one kind of hits a little bit more like Mayday. I mean, it's interesting. It's kind of a precursor to a lot of the other newer Makawa forms. It's one we'll be bringing back here on Mr. Maple. It's one we're working on offering again. We haven't offered Benny Makawa probably in a few years, maybe even since the Maple Mafia eBay days. But we've offered that one, and we'll have it back.
Let's go ahead and hit our top 20, and then we'll get back to some honorable mentions here in a little bit, too. That way, keep people guessing a little bit on what's on this list. Y'all, coming up at number 20, we have Acer palmatum, big fan.
Oh, man, if you know my catchphrase, I'm a big fan of this one. I say that too much. It's something I get accused of. I'm still going to make that I'm a big fan of Acer Japonicum t-shirt. But, guys, I actually named a tree Big Fan, and I am a big fan of this tree. I was actually sitting in a garden show in Augusta, South Carolina one time, and I had Makawa seedlings for sale, and people were picking them up for bonsai, and I kept looking at this one Makawa that had big fan foliage. Like, it just had big foliage, and it really enticed me. You know, I started grafting it, put it back a little bit. We're still getting this one into production. It does leave out with more of a pinkish orange hue to it as well. So you get a little bit of that pinkish red going on in it, a little bit of interesting color variance. But what really enticed me into this one is it had larger Emoenum, kind of like leaves. It's still in that palmatum Makawa category, but it reminded me a little bit more of something like Osakazuki size fans to it.
Yeah, it has much larger foliage. And because it has that same tight, dense habit that Macawa Yatsubusa has, it grabs your attention. But Big Fan also has some really nice spring colors to it as well. I mean, this one can give you some really nice shades of pink to like that pink orange in the early spring. And it was selected for its larger foliage, but it has some good spring interest as well.
Really cool plant, and one we'll be bringing back here or bringing out for the first time here at Mr. Maple, Acer palmatum, Big Fan. All right, so at number 19 here, we've got Acer palmatum, Shishi Yatsubusa. Now, there's a couple different forms of this one in the trade. The one we're discussing here is the true form. It looks more like Macawa Yatsubusa than most of the things on this list. One of the interesting key differences, this one tends to get very wide. So I really like how low and dense it is. There's a gorgeous specimen of this. One at JD Vertree's place, that walkthrough. Definitely check that out on YouTube. But also on our conifer garden walkthrough with the JC Ralston. And you can see how this one tends to be one of more low and spreading shape than your typical Macawa Yatsubusa.
The other thing I like about Shishi Yatsubusa is often the leaves on the plant will cup upward a little bit. You know, Peve starfish cups downward. Shishi Yatsubusa, the leaves will actually cup upwards just a little bit. So if you get a light rain, you can really notice that water just pulling up on those leaves. Like Macawa Yatsubusa, the seeds point upward, but it's really the leaves that cup upward a little bit that gives Shishi Yatsubusa a different texture with that layering habit.
So we find the Shishi Yatsubusa to be the correct form that looks more like Macawa Yatsubusa. It's a more dense, compact, Makawa-looking shape, definitely more width to it going on. There is an incorrect form in the trade, and it may be mixed up with some other things. But there is often a form sold of this I've seen going around, and not as common now. Maybe 10 years ago, that looks more like a Kiyohime style, and we don't find that one to be correct.
Yeah, and I think it may actually be Shishiohime that it's getting confused with, because Yatsubusa means dwarf compact, and so does Hime, which, you know, that makes sense how those two trees might have gotten mixed up at some point in the nursery trade.
Yeah, it was cool to see Shishi Yatsubusa at J.D. Vertree's garden. You know, Vertrees wrote the book on Japanese maples, so it was nice to see the correct form in his garden. You know, it was what he was collecting even pre the first edition of Japanese maples. So it's kind of nice sometimes to see those original plants and get that confirmation.
And he had it planted right next to Macawa Yatsubusa because he was doing just like we do and was comparing and contrasting how the two plants are truly different. And it's always cool when you have two specimens that are grown in the exact same environment and you can actually identify, hey, you can see what makes each tree special.
All right, we're about to number 18, guys.
Guys, coming at number 18, we've got Acer palmatum Huffs Dwarf.
Shout out to Barbara Hupp. She's written some cool things in our review section on MrMaple.com. A little bit of the history behind Huffs Dwarf. Barbara Hupp actually found this tree, sent it to JD Vertrees. He loved it too, grafted it. The original one was there at Vertrees. I know she tried to purchase the original tree when the house sold, and such a cool story. We love getting the history behind these plants. Hups before that were often doing Christmas trees and found this cool palmatum in the 80s. Such a neat plant. And shout out to Barbara for getting this into the trade. I love that. An amazing plant. Now, I could argue this one to be almost in that Shishi family because it's so weird. It kind of fits into both categories. Like we put it in the Mikawa family here, but it has a lot of what I like from like Kuronagishi. So it has a little bit of that Kuronagishi-like foliage, but it does have some of that Mikawa out kind of trait as well.
Some of these could be married in. I mean, some of these could be in the Shishigashira family and the Macawa Yatsubusa family. I mean, you can be in two families, right?
I hope so.
And Huffs Dwarf definitely does that. I mean, it has larger twisted foliage, larger foliage like Macawa Yatsubusa, but it cups downward and twists, almost reminiscent of something like a Shishigashira. And with that tighter, dense, compact habit, this plant is just outstanding. The new growth on this is like a coral pink. Mm-hmm. And so it really puts on a show every time it puts on new growth. But I have noticed that Huffs Dwarf is typically one you want to give some protection from the hot afternoon sun for the best growth rate on it. I mean, I think it performs better, especially in the south, whenever it gets a little bit of that morning sun, afternoon shade.
I mean, it's really cool. It definitely has that elongated foliage look to it. It's one that often gets confused for pot plants. I've seen this one in the garden, and people are like, man, I know somebody's climbing over the fence to see what the heck you're growing with this Huffs Dwarf, because it does have that elongated kind of feathered leaf look to it. Kind of funny there, but it is a fun plant to be growing. Another excellent candidate for container garden. And if you've got a Mikawa garden, I mean, got to have a Huffs Dwarf. That one fits so well in there aesthetically, and it just gives you some variance and texture and density, but another compact, smaller form. All right, so getting in here at number 17, and I could argue this one up higher on the list. I think Tim stopped me from putting this in maybe my even top 7. Mankawa Yatsubusa. Now, this was named by our friend Keith Johansson of Metro Maples. Keith's now in Italy, named so many different cool plants. This was an homage to Carl Munn with, kind of Mankawa, Carl naming Moonrise. So it's got the Munn for Carl Munn and then Mankawa Yatsubusa. So a real mess of a conglomerate, name there. He's kind of mashed some things together, but I'm a big fan of Carl as well. So Mankawa Yatsubusa it is. And it's interesting. Keith swears that he actually hybridized Moonrise with Macawa Yatsubusa. Now, whether that's exactly true or not, he certainly found a seedling with some great traits of both.
Yeah, the story goes behind it that he was unloading some trucks that were coming in and they had large flowers on them of Macawa Yatsubusa and Moonrise. And so he took pollen off of one, put on the other, went through the seedlings, and found Mankawa. Now, that is the fact, though. Now, whether or not the hybrid actually happened from him crossing it.
Someone would have to test it.
Someone would have to test it to prove that this had Sirasol in a minute. But it does have some apricots, and it does have some of that pinkish color that Moonrise does in the early spring with that Macawa Yatsubusa habit.
Really cool tree. It's not uncommon to get some of that lime green or older growth too, so you get a little bit of that color change. It's not quite as vibrant as Moonrise, but you definitely have some of those Moonrise vibes going on in there. I could argue that one higher up on the list. I think that one is a color variance that is really premium. I like that a lot. I have one in my display garden. It's one I've been monitoring for a while. I think I first got this one from Keith probably around 2011, so I've had it for a minute, and one we'll be offering here on Mr. Maple again for sure.
So coming in at number 16, we have Acer palmatum Siyun Kaku.
Yeah, we got the big boy on the list. Now, this is one that gets out there a lot faster than Macawa Yatsubusa. Often people will come into Maplewood Gardens and they'll go, oh, how old's this Macawa Yatsubusa? And there's a 25-plus-year-old Macawa Yatsubusa there in the garden, very well established. That tree's probably close to 8 feet now, and it's really something people ask about. And then the next question is, how old is that Macawa Yatsubusa? And I tell them, well, that's actually a Kaku, and that tree's only about 7 years old. So, it's pretty interesting to see these two trees that are around the same shape, and they do densen up. So this one's a much faster-growing Macawa form, but as they get some age to them, they kind of tighten up a little bit too. So you kind of look a little bit more like Macawa, just gets out there a lot faster.
I remember in 2008 when they brought this tree back from Japan and they started talking about how this was a vigorous Macawa Yatsubusa. And I saw a young plant and you're like, that foliage is a little bit smaller than Macawa. But then as you see a mature plant in the landscape, it's tightly layering habit. I mean, everything about it screams Macawa Yatsubusa. And it is a larger growing Macawa Yatsubusa type. I mean, the tightly layering foliage just grabs your attention out there. And this is a tree that can get out there. I mean, it can be 8 to 10 feet tall in 10 years. And that means that it can give you that statement that you're looking for with a large Macawa Yatsubusa in a shorter period of time.
Yeah, I was real impressed with the one that's probably closer to 8 now, 7 or 8 years old, but it's really tightening up a good bit. Like it's starting to have more smaller internoting on the newest growth. So it looks essentially like a really old arching Macawa. I mean, people are shocked when I tell them it's not Macawa Yatsubusa with a 25-plus-year-old Macawa Yatsubusa inside of it because they look very similar. Now, you get a very bold red fall color on this one. Often Macawa will be a little bit more orange red, and Kaku tends to be a little bit more bold red for us. So one other color variance there, but excellent tree. And if somebody's looking to get a tree that's going to get out there a little bit bigger than Macawa Yatsubusa, I mean, I think this is the one in that family you can get some good sizes quick on.
Now coming in at number 15, we have Acer palmatum Teroyama.
Another nice one. Now this one tends to get out there a little bit faster than Macawa as well, but it also has some of that density to it. It's another one I would kind of compare a little bit to Kuranajishi on the foliage. It has a little bit more of that elongated foliage look. I've had this one leaf out in the spring, incredible shades of pink. Now, as it tightens up, you get more of that Macawa density to it as well. I remember first seeing this one in Yano's book for maples, and it was on that list of like this sitting in America, but we got to have it kind of stuff back in the day. I was able to obtain it eventually through Buckholtz. I think he was one of the first ones to get it in the United States. An amazing variation. I think probably underrated, especially for its spring color.
Yeah, it's a plant that just has this small, dense, compact habit. The leaves are the size of the Macawa Yatsubusa on its foliage, but it twists and curls and has a little bit more of an upright stature to it. And this just gives it such a fun, unique shape. You can get on the foliage too some silver greens to blue greens on the color on the foliage itself, and the fall color is a bright, bright, bright red. So this plant just rocks it out in the garden, and I think it started growing more and more in popularity as we've offered it here at Mr. Maple.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an incredible variance. I think it's also an interesting avenue for further exploration. So if you're really into Macawa types, you want to do cool new things, I think seedlings from Teroyama might give you a starting place that are going to have that Macawa-like trait, but not necessarily in the Macawa lineage. So it might not be a seedling from Macawa, but it could open the door to more interesting styles that are similar. All right, y'all, coming in here at number 14 on our list, we've got Tattoo.
This is that one from Love Boat, right?
Yeah, I've got a ton of comments on our different videos. It's well before my time. It is well before my time, but I do know that Tattoo is the little guy that was on Fantasy Island. Now, I will go ahead and admit I've trolled people for a minute with this one. I got a lot of comments originally. I think me and Brian laughed for a while because it was just like 40 comments in a row that were like, that's not the right movie. That's not the right show. But I'm well aware. But it is named for the guy with a little smaller stature from Fantasy Island, Tattoo, and a great plant. Now, this is one that I believe was put a name on by Dick Wolf and Billy Schwartz, but it actually heralded from a different nursery originally. They found this one, loved it, got it introduced, got it into the trade, and really cool, compact, dense form of Macawa. Now, it's going to be smaller than Macawa. In a 10-year period, this one's only going to be around 3 feet, where a Macawa could be a lot larger overall. So you're going to get a more ruffled look and a much denser overall, smaller habit.
Yeah, the leaves are more serrated. The growth is much slower than Macawa Yatsubusa. And again, this is another one that has a Kiyohime style out there with the name Tattoo on it as well.
We call that one Bad Tattoo.
We call the Kiyohime version of bad tattoo, because once you get it, you're going to regret it because you're really trying to get Acer palmatum tattoo.
I had a lot of people back when that one was circulating. It's kind of cleared up in the trade a little bit. I think most of what you're seeing now is correct. I know certainly 10 years ago, if you got a tattoo, their first question was, did you get the good one or the bad one? Because one was exactly just Kiyohime. Now, it was a beautiful tree. I love Kiyohime, but it wasn't what you were going for. The original tattoo should be that ruffled, regal-looking Mikawa in a nice, dense, compact habit. Beautiful tree to be growing. So if you're gonna have a few drinks and wake up the next morning with a tattoo, make sure it's a tattoo from MrMaple.com.
Tattoo is just such a fun plant, though. I mean, it's such a slow grower that you will, it is a slow grower. Give it a small space, give it a container, use it for bonsai. It will be an extremely slow grower. Macawa Yatsubusa is noted for being a dwarf, but people often don't realize how slow of a grower tattoo can actually be in the landscape. I mean, if you're not looking for a true dwarf miniature Japanese maple, tattoo might not be the right tree. You might want to go with Macawa Yatsubusa. I mean, it is a slow grower that, will be 2 to 3 feet in 10 years. And we've got one at Maplewood Gardens we've had in the ground for probably 15 years now. And it is a small tree. It's one of the smallest of the Mikawa family collection.
Beautiful plant to be growing. Excellent for container garden. Excellent for bonsai. If you're looking for a Mikawa that you want to keep in a big pot, just make it look amazing, think about a tattoo. It's a great candidate for a container garden.
Coming in at number 13, Acer palmatum, Angel the Prince.
Oh man, you just said it and it already sold out. That one sells out quick on our website. Amazing tree. We're working to get these always back in stock. Angel the Prince, I would almost compare it a little bit more into that Teroyama category. It's got a little bit of that kind of thing going on where it's dense. One of the reasons this one is so popular is because it has a little bit of what we like about Teroyama, but also a bright purple border on that green foliage in the early spring.
And new growth during the summer can be a darker color too. And I think it just gives you a lot of everything you're looking for in that Mikawa family collection, but with a little bit of unique spring interest. And I mean, Teroyama is fantastic, but Angel the Prince is like, we just took everything that people loved about Teroyama and added this extra spring color to it. It's such a fun, newer selection that I think is going to really hit the market.
Yeah, they pair really well together. I mean, one having the purple border, one having that pink spring, a little bit of diversity going on. They're kind of on that outlier of the Mikawa family because they're a little bit more open, but they still have a lot of density to them. I think it's an excellent addition to that Mikawa family. One of the first to have a true purple border to that spring interest too. So you're kind of getting that density, that layering habit, but then also an extreme color variance. I do like, you mentioned their darker green. It does have a nice regal, kind of more of a like an evergreen green, like a little darker green in the midsummer, which is nice as well. Makes it pair really nice if you got a whole collection of these. I like to put all my Mikawas together in one place. I got a whole Mikawa garden going on, so I can look at all the different traits and variances there together.
Now coming in at number 12, we've got Acer palmatum, Catalina Yatsubusa.
Catalina's great. This is one of our first variegated Mikawas here on the list. Beautiful tree. Now this one is going to be a nice compact form with intense blushes of like yellows and white in that variegated foliage. So you kind of get everything you like about Mikawa, but with lots of variegation going on as well.
And this is one where the new growth on this can give you irregular shaped leaves that aren't that Mikawa looking. I mean, they still have a little bit of Mikawa looking to them, but they've got this unique sickle-like variegation on them. And you get some lime greens, you get some yellows, you get some creams in there, and it gives you a very unique feel for a variegated Macawa Yatsubusa. It has that same tight, dense layering habit as Macawa Yatsubusa. It's a little more upright than a few of the other variegated forms of Mikawa selections, but this plant just keeps that layering habit that everybody loves.
Beautiful tree. And I kind of like how it puts on these weird little like antennas over it. Sometimes that late summer new growth kind of looks a little bug-like, which is weird, but it kind of gives it these little prawns over top of it. Looks like little antennas sticking out of it sometimes. It looks pretty cool. Has a little bit of what you like about Dr. Seuss. Kind of has a little bit of that kind of vibe.
It really does. And it's just a very unique, alien-like Macawa Yatsubusa. Right. I mean, if it had another name, Alien Mikawa would probably be a fantastic name for it, because it really gives you that crazy, unreal color and crazy, unreal leaves. And being it has that lively feel with being a Macawa Yatsubusa style, I mean, it's a tree you really need in your garden.
All right, y'all, coming in here at number 11, we got Bazinga.
Bazinga.
Always popular. Bazinga's introduction by our friend Ed Shin. Really beautiful colors on this one. This was one of the first red Macawa Yatsubusas out there. We did offer it as well at an open house, kind of as an open house exclusive. So we got a little Mikawa pattern going on with some of these open houses we've been doing. Bazinga sold out in a minute when we offered it. I mean, everybody was fighting over this one. It has a nice red spring color. It does fade to kind of a darker green pretty quickly into the spring, but it is an incredible dark red spring interest.
Yeah, I mean, Ed, for being a collector, he's had such an amazing effect on the nursery industry. I mean, he's introduced some cool plants like Blushing Beauty and Bazinga and Think Pink, but then he's also just, made sure that plants got out there like Lima Gold and some of these other plants from Dick Wolf. He really has touched all aspects of the nursery industry and working with nurseries. And it's crazy how much one collector can have a impact on the nursery industry as a whole. And Bazinga is one of those red Mikawa types that is just some amazing spring color. I mean, Bazinga just rocks it out in the spring and gives you some of that deep, deep, deep reds. And for me, it was, for a long time, was one of our favorite red Mikawa selections. And we've been growing this now for...
I think I got it around 2011.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. We used to go up there every year. Ed would have these gatherings in his garden. And I believe the original Bazinga was a seedling from Talon Buchholz bought by Pat Monroe, which was a friend of Ed's. And then Ed purchased it from him. There were 4 of them. And then they became Ed's 1 through 4. We grafted all 4 of them. Well, number 1 was the best form of those. And that's what eventually became Bazinga.
Now, Bazinga is a fantastic, really cool plant. I think it's a plant that if you give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun, you could probably keep that pink red a little longer. But if you're not giving it sunlight, you're not going to brighten up those reds as well as you will if you give it at least some morning sun. So if you're getting Bazinga, keep that in mind.
All right, y'all, coming in here at number 10, another one from Ed Shin, really popular for his garden, Lima Gold. So Lima Gold is the smallest leaf Macawa on this list. Kind of has some of those Macawa-like vibes with tiny foliage.
Now, Lima Gold is named after Lima, Pennsylvania. You could say Lima Gold, Lima... but
maybe my hatred for lima beans is why I refuse to call it Lima. Lima. It is Lima to me because, lima, ugh. It's a pretty tree, man. Why we got to put lima beans in the mix?
Now, Dick Wolf had Red Maple Nurseries, introduced Emperor One, some amazing plants. And Lima Gold was one of his trees that he had in his evaluations that he was introducing. And he ended up giving the plant to Ed Shin. And this tree is in the nursery trade because Ed shared this tree with so many other nurseries around to make sure that this tree got out there and got into the nursery trade. And it really is probably one of the smallest leaf Macawa selections.
Maybe if we called them lima beans, it'd taste a little bit. Anyway, great one for bonsai. Think about this one as one of the premium choices for container gardening as well as bonsai. It has that density that you love about Macawa Yatsubusa. Probably a separate origin, being from Dick Wolf, that Red Maple Nurseries. They were going through so many interesting, cool plants. Has that density to it of Macawa, but with a much smaller foliage. Now, the gold actually comes in the fall color, so this one has a good color variance going on there as well. Typically, Macawa Yatsubusa in the fall is bright orange with accents of red to it. Lima Gold, as the name suggests, goes to a brilliant yellow. So you're also going to get some good color variance going on in there amongst your other Macawas. So you can place this one in your Macawa garden in a place where you want some fall yellow splash.
So coming in at number 9, we've got Acer palmatum koi. And this is a selection from the Area 51 collection here at Mr. Maple.
I like those guys.
Yeah, I know. We went through so many Macawa Yatsubusa seedlings, and we're kind of picky. I mean, you've seen us offer Macawa Yatsubusa before, and we've went through thousands of Macawa Yatsubusa seedlings. And koi really stood out to us in a number of ways. And one of the ways is the foliage itself twists and curls, and the foliage is just very pleasant to look at, and it stands out from all the other Macawa types just on the foliage itself.
Yeah, we went through, I mean, you wouldn't believe the crazy amount of seedlings we went through Macawa Yatsubusa. There were years at Mr. Maple where Tim and I grew 250 pounds of seeds. And I mean, there were over 50 pounds of Macawa Yatsubusa seeds, thousands and thousands of Macawa seedlings. And so we went through so many different ones. So it does take a lot to impress us. So if we're going to name one, There's got to be something going on there. And this one had incredible spring bronzing. It had nice color to it, had a denser habit to it than Mikawa. So it kept putting on a lot more density to it. Also, that fall color was more picked up in electric than maybe any of the other Mikawas on the list. It could be my favorite Macawa Yatsubusa family fall color tree.
It really can. It's very consistent. It appears to be fairly vigorous for us, growing at about the same rate as Macawa Yatsubusa. So for a dwarf, it's probably a pretty good grower. I mean, Mikawa's a dwarf selection, but many of these other types
It's a little faster than something like Japanese Princess or Mayday for sure.
It really is. It really is. And it just makes a great tree out there in the landscape, a small little Japanese maple. And koi, I mean, it changes colors throughout the seasons. Kois, are great. That they're great for having all those different colors, and fits probably near your koi pond pretty well as well.
Right. Now, this one in that fall color is not uncommon to have a lot of yellow in it. That's one of the things I like about it. Macawa's typically oranges to reds. I've had this one be high intensity yellow and red, so almost a little bit more Japonicum fall color going on there for what it looks like. Really showy plant though. Great new growth. It can kind of yellow out a little bit midsummer, but you still get those crazy pink to bronze new growth going on over top of it. I think as you get this one in the ground, and especially as it matures, you're really going to be impressed with how the leaves cup down and how it has a higher density level to it than a lot of the other Makawas on this list.
So coming at number 8, we've got Acer palmatum Lilypad.
Boom. This is a good one, y'all. Lilypad is a lot of fun. The first time I ever saw this tree, I paid way too much for it. Oh my gosh. We were at a Maple Society. Shout out to the Maple Society. We were at an auction for the Maple Society, and Swings, who many of you know from China, and me got in a little bit of bidding war on this one. I got pretty close to $500 for a 3-gallon on this one. I'm not going to say the exact amount, but yeah, I bid it up a good bit. I ended up getting the tree, and I shared some signs with him for good faith there. So we did share, but I did win it because I couldn't let this one go out of my sight. I love Lilypad. Anytime you get a variegated Makawa, my heart's going to be beating. So what we do is we'll pay the big bucks, then y'all wait for them. We'll get the price down and get them in numbers. But this one is a low, wide spreading form of a variegated Makawa. So think about it almost like that Shishi Yatsubusa. It's that low width to it. Even, I would say even shorter and wider than Shishi Yatsubusa, but variegated.
And it gets its name because it does grow short and wide, kind of like a lily pad has that large leaf to it and it gets very wide. So does this tree. So it stays very short, compact, and the variegation on it, the most comparable thing to it would be that Catalina Yatsubusa, but they are very, very different. And when you have them side by side, it's real easy to tell the differences, but you often get more of that almost Alkanzashi variegation on Lilypad. And again, that shorter, wider habit really helps this tree stand out and gives it a unique feature.
Excellent for the container garden. Like this is perfect if you want something that's going to go in a pot, make a real nice spread to it, give you a lot aesthetically, even when it's out of leaf. It's going to have a lot going on. And pretty good fall colors too. I mean, this one can have yellows, oranges, and reds all going on at the same time. It's not uncommon for your variegated parts of your leaf to be more orange to yellow, where your greener parts are throwing out a little bit more of that traditional Makawa red. Really showy on the fall, and an interesting habit to it, dense and full. Now, it's a very ruffled leaf as well, so it gives it a little bit more of a ruffled overall texture, especially as these mature. You get elongated, ruffled foliage to it. There's a lot to like about Lilypad, and that's why it's up here at number 8 on our list. You want to tell them about this next one or not?
I don't know if I want to tell them about this next one yet until we get it released.
It's coming to Mr. Maple, y'all. You're going to be bugging us for this one. Y'all going to be bugging us. This one, we're going to get a bunch of phone calls for this one tomorrow. We got El Tigre. This is another variegated Makawa type, y'all. Coming in here at number 7. This one is very unique. Didn't even have this one on our list. I think it was still too top secret to put it on our list of variegated Makawas when we did that
We're
video.
closer to getting it released.
Yeah, this one's coming. Another variegated Makawa type. Now, this one has a cream to yellow variegation as well. What really sets El Tigre apart is that, especially in the early spring, all the foliage cups heavily down when it's first leafing out. I mean, it looks like a little cactus. Like me and Brian were out there looking at this thing this spring, and we were just like geeking out looking at this thing because we're like, this looks so weird. It looks like a bird almost, or a cactus. I mean, you got to describe it as this feathered density to it because the foliage cups down. It even makes it look tighter and denser.
And it it doesn't look as variegated when it first leaves out, but that variegation starts coming in about mid-spring where you really see the two different tones of green, where it's a lime green on dark green. And if you've seen our cultivar, we've seen the cultivar we've often offered on Mr. Maple, Acer palmatum relish. This looks like you crossed relish with Macawa Yatsubusa.
Perfect example, yeah.
And I mean, literally, you get that green on cream.
Almost a little blue-green in there.
A little bit of blue-green in there, yeah, on a Macawa Yatsubusa style. And so this plant will sell out very quickly whenever we list it. A lot of people don't know about it yet, but it's coming to Mr. Maple in the not-too-distant future.
El Tigre the Tiger. You're going to love this one. Another perfect candidate for container gardening. It's going to really add a little bit to that variegated Macawa section, and it's an interesting one. I think it has maybe even a little stronger variegated look to it once it's established than Catalina, where it's a different style. It's almost like you get more of one leaf that has variegation instead of that bordered leaf. You almost get like a sickle in it. So you get these little almost Aridano Nishiki style swirls going on in it as it matures. Still bright kind of cream on green variegation, but very interesting in its style.
So coming in at number 6, we've got Acer palmatum, Yukiyama Yamayuki Snow Kitten.
All right, guys. We listed a Snow Kitten. I originally got it, I think, under the name Snow Kitten. It's got a ton of names. I originally saw it under the name Elmer. I think Dennis Dodge and everybody were trading pictures of this tree as Elmer. It came to the nursery trade mostly through Fred Hooks. He kind of got that one out there, and maybe that's why it had so many different names. He got it at different places. Sometimes it's called Yukiyama. Same plant. So I broke the bank on this one as well. I already had Snow Kitten here, had a 7-gallon Snow Kitten. Saw this one at another plant auction, and dang if I didn't pay like $3.50 for a 1 gallon of Yukiyama. Same plant. So don't make the mistake I did. We'll fix that for you here on Mr. Maple. We'll go by one name. Now, the first name, and the name Ed Shin always encourages me to have on this one, is for our late friend, Fred Hooks, and he did put the name Snow Kitten on originally. Haruko Buchholz also tells me that the name Yukiyama is a misnomer. It doesn't really, it means like a snow pile or something.
Like a pile of snow.
Pile of snow.
Rather than like a snow-covered mountain.
Yeah, it doesn't really mean like Snow Peak or anything like that. So it's a little bit of a misnomer as well. Some people didn't like the original name Snow Kitten. I know that was kind of hated on a little bit as well. And I mean, it could be a little catchy. We like the catchy names here. I do Hot Blonde, so I mean, I get it. But Snow Kitten is kind of the original name on this one. I think the original tree was actually imported from New Zealand. It was in a bonsai pot, and it went to Larry Stanley. And Larry had this tree. He had a major collapse in his greenhouse. So the way this one worked, the greenhouse fell in around the tree. And as Larry told me originally, the story might have changed some, but as he told me originally, this variegated sport was the only thing sticking up out of the greenhouse where the hole was. So the greenhouse had fallen down. He looked out there, and here stuck this sport up that was a variegated Macawa. And so he grafted it, got that one in the trade. I think Fred paid him for naming rights. So it kind of went back and forth on that. So that's kind of why you see it as different names in the trade. But I can confirm to you that Snow Kitten and Yukiyama, Elmer, Macawa Nishiki.
Yamayuki.
Yeah, I think when I first saw it from Fred at NJ Acer's place, he had it listed as Macawa Nishiki, and we let him know that we already had a tree we were selling named Macawa Nishiki, so the name changed from Macawa Nishiki, which was, I think, the second name it had, to Snow Kitten, and then others changed it to Yukiyama and back. So whatever you want to call this, and we don't get into the politics, all that. I think the first way I saw it officially was Snow Kitten, but cool plant to be growing. This one is a little bit more finicky. I always let people know it's one of the more striking variegated forms of Macawa Yatsubusa. I mean, it can be a little bit more delicate, so it does take some practice and growing this one. We are going to bring it to Mr. Maple, and we're going to give you a decent price on it too. It's going to be one that don't break the bank on this one. I've seen some going for like $500 in 1 gallon and stuff. That's crazy. We're not getting into that houseplant market of like some of those plants that go for thousands and thousands in a 1 gallon, but you know, they are a little bit more costly. This one is tricky because the more you fertilize it, the less variegated it is. And if you don't fertilize it, it doesn't grow. So if you want to get a decent size one, you have to kind of grow it a little while. So it does take a little bit longer for nurseries to get them out there. And that's why those prices creep up on this one from time to time. I always like to let people know what they're getting into. It is a little more tricky than Macawa Yatsubusa. It's not going to be quite as durable as some of the others on this list.
And it is that Aridano Nishiki style variegation. And so often, if you're not pruning on this plant and you're just letting it sit out there in the landscape, you will get less and less variegation on it. So if you're at a nursery and you see nurseries who are grafting lots of them, they're taking trimmings off of their plant, which is promoting more and more variegation. And so you're seeing really variegated plants out there in the nursery. This is one that you may have to take that approach that we talk about in one of our videos on how to prune for increased variegation. You may have to take that approach on the snow kitten as well, because even though it is a dwarf, by pruning it, you'll really encourage more growth and more variegation.
Pretty excited. I'm going to be going through some seedlings of this one this year, hopefully. I'm just saying, I think it's got tons of potential. A lot of interest in this one for good reason. Coming in here at number 6 on our list. All right, y'all, we're about to break into the top 5 of that Mikawa family. I know you got many guesses. Let us know if you're watching in the live chat your top 5 Mikawa family trees. You can probably got some good guesses. Let's get into a few more of those honorable mentions before we hit the top 5.
All right, y'all, we've got Acer palmatum Tom Thumb.
This one's cool. I got it from our friend and mentor, Elizabeth Mundy. We got to get her on the podcast, by the way. She was a little shy about it. If you know Elizabeth, encourage her to be on. She is incredible. I don't think we'd even have a nursery here without Elizabeth. She's been one of our biggest friends and mentors here. So I got that one from her, and it reminded me a little bit more of a rounded leaf tattoo. It had a little bit more amoenum size foliage to it. As I've got the 2 in the ground long term, they have gotten more similar. I think that's why it got on the honorable mention here, is it does share a lot of similarities with tattoo.
It may be a little slower grower than tattoo.
Yeah.
And tattoo is one of the slowest growing in the Mikawa family collection. So that's about one of the key distinguishing characteristics I've noticed. The leaf is slightly different, but it is a slower grower than tattoo itself. And such a fun plant. Another one on our honorable mentions, we've got Acer palmatum albajo.
Oh, albajo is cool. I mean, that one's a weird one. That one, we put it in that Mikawa family. It's got a regular different size leaf than Mikawa, so it's a little bit more of, I'd almost say a small pyramid as it forms too. It tends to be denser. You tend to not see into the plant as much as Mikawa, so it doesn't put on those crazy arms as much, but it tends to be a small, oval kind of pyramidal shape.
Needs some protection from the hot afternoon sun here in the south. Goes to more of a yellow color in the fall, yellow with a little bit of orange. And it is a very unique plant. I would say young plants are very layered, but as you see a mature plant out in the landscape, it almost gives you more like a Mikawa hybrid with something like a Lima Gold.
Yeah,
I mean, you get more of that rounded, more appearance.
So another fun one here that hit our honorable mention, Shishi Yatsubusa. Now, I originally got this plant from Don Shadow. He said, hey, get some signs on this. So yeah, I started cutting right away. We were visiting him. It was one he had brought back from Japan. And it also reminds me of what could potentially be a broom on Mikawa, maybe a lot in that tattoo or Tom Thumb kind of vein. It is kind of a tattoo version from Japan.
Another honorable mention is Acer palmatum ladybug. This is a smaller growing red dwarf Macawa Yatsubusa selection, the Area 51 collection of MrMaple.
And we could break down all those. We probably got 20 evaluations. We could do that one all day. We could play this game of like, this one ain't out there yet, but we're working on it. That's a good one though. And of course, probably top of the honorable mentions list, Pinky. So Pinky's a fun one. The reason it hits that honorable mentions list is this one's got to have a symbiotic relationship with another plant. You have to keep rootstock on it. It is too pink to grow on its own. Had a little mishap here at our nursery once where one of our workers cut the pinky part out thinking it was rootstock coming out and the top part was the graft. We had the label on the rootstock there sticking up high in the sky and, it looked like rootstock going on. Sadly enough, the same thing happened at Buckholz. He originated this tree. The original tree is, maybe 3 by 2 feet, and it's probably 20-something years old. So it's a very slow growing tree that requires a green tree to be grafted to give it the chlorophyll. If you left it on its own, it would die. It can't grow because it doesn't have enough green in it to form its own chlorophyll to be healthy. We're going to play around with that one. We've got that one in another form Talon gave us. It's kind of the exact same thing, to be honest with you. And we're going to play around with those and find a way to offer those for you. Maybe something we graft into Makawa seedlings, maybe something we graft onto Ryusins or Tsukasa silhouettes. I can think of all the different ways I could create something odd that would feed this one, but give it something creative. But Pinky, kind of a 1.5 or a 0.5 cultivar. It kind of has to have something else with it to live.
All right. So while we were doing those honorable mentions, hopefully you started thinking about what would be in your top 5 for Macawa Yatsubusa family. And we're breaking it into number 5 with Acer palmatum, Mystic Mikawa.
Oh man, now you're getting into the hitters. Mystic is a great one. Introduction by our friend Crispin Silva. I actually had a nearly identical tree, and so I don't believe in introducing two trees with the exact same traits. I had an orange Macawa Yatsubusa we were going to call Oompa Loompa at the exact same time that Crispin was introducing Mystic. I think his kind of hit the trait a little faster, so it was out there more. In fact, I bought several from him, so I had more of an interest at that point in getting Mystic going than the Oompa Loompa. So that was a little one that was out there that almost happened was Oompa Loompa. Mystic, intense orange version of Mikawa. Now, I recommend giving this one some early morning sun, late day shade, and I also find that it has better colors for me in the ground. Maybe it's something to do with the pH on some of these Mikawa types. I'm not sure, but it does tend to be a little more muted in the container garden. I have a whole Mikawa little landscape where I stick them all in there. This one gets high intensity sun, especially in the early spring garden. And it's one of those like rock stars in my garden. That color every year is insane. I almost get that like bold orange going on with like pink colors in it. Really nice.
Now, this appears to be a slower growing Macawa Yatsubusa too. I mean, it's slower than Macawa Yatsubusa itself. It is a good grower though for being a small dwarf tree. It does put on lots of growth, but it's just a short distance.
Right.
And this is an easy plant to grow that gives you some really nice oranges in the spring. And for me, this is the best orange selection of the Macawa Yatsubusas. There's not an orange that I think is better in the nursery trade than Mystic Mikawa.
Yeah, I honestly, I thought Oompa Loompa could have rivaled it originally, but there was no need to have two. Like, they were literally too close, and we didn't need a second version in the trade. We went all in with Mystic ourselves, and I think it's a great name. I like Mystic Mikawa. I like what it does. It's perfect version of that. It complements several of the other color variances very well, and it just fits in there perfect for an orange version of Macawa Yatsubusa. So coming in at number 4, guys, we've got Acer palmatum Mayday.
Y'all, Mayday can give you some really nice colors in the spring, but where I love this plant is where it goes to like blonde right after that. You can really get some blonde colors on a Macawa Yatsubusa type. And this plant is just outrageous how it can give you some really apricots in the spring that are just exquisite. And with that tightly layering habit for colors, Mayday just rocks it out between those apricots and those blonde colors on this Macawa Yatsubusa style.
Yeah, you can get some pink on this some years as well. I mean, it's not uncommon for it to look a little bit more like Japanese Princess some seasons. In fact, I've known some nurseries that thought some of their Japanese Princess were more yellow that season, and they've started to switch the labels on those a little bit. So you will see some mix up there, but very distinguishable by their leaf. This one's going to have way more of that Mikawa-shaped foliage to it. Goes typically in the ground to a light yellow, like Tim was saying. I like that early spring yellow. You really get some nice pale yellow shades going on, and it looks great next to Tattoo. I mean, Tattoo's going to be sitting there in that dark regal green. Mayday's going to have that bright yellow color. Pops so well. I mean, I have this right beside a couple other trees, Japanese Princess and Mystic, and it just shows out. I mean, the color are incredible. We're actually going to be collecting some seed off the original Mayday this year as well. Really cool to see what can happen there. But Mayday really brings it. One of the more sought-after forms, I would say, in that Macawa Yatsubusa family. I think this one may be the most limited, but also maybe one of the most high demands. I know when we list this in 1 gallons, we'll often have 50 1 gallons on our website, and they may sell out in a minute. I mean, people accuse us of having small sets. Sometimes we'll have upwards of 100 of this one, and they don't last very long. We list new trees every Tuesday at 10 a.m., and I've had sets of 100 that didn't make it 2 minutes.
Now, Mayday, I remember when Matt and I first saw this plant, what I believe to be this plant, we were going and visiting Buckholt's nursery, and Matt and I were like, man, look at this plant. It's got that Macawa Yatsubusa style. Look at it. It's got these unique colors to it. And it had the name originally on it of Joy of May. And then that translated whenever it was actually getting released to Mayday. And such a cool plant that I think needs to be used more. But then again, it's so difficult to get in numbers for us because they sell out so quickly. So, don't hate us. We work as hard as we can to sell you more trees. Trust me, we're trying to sell more trees.
We actually kept more stock plants of this than anyone in the world. We have more Mayday in the works here than at Buckholtz Nursery. We have probably 15 stock plants that we have in the ground producing signs, so we're up in our numbers on this one a lot. So if you're looking at this one, don't overpay it. It's coming back to Mr. Maple. You can find this one at reasonable numbers. We often get people say, well, you should just increase your prices a whole bunch and see what happens, because I know some of these sell out pretty quickly. We do try to keep it pretty modest. I mean, I think we offer a real fair price for these in a 1 gallon, and we will start to get some sustainable sets of stuff like this. I hope that will rival even some of our Makawa Yatsubusa production numbers. These are trees I want to keep in stock year round. Mayday, always a fan favorite though. Maybe the fastest to sell out of anything on this list so far that's been offered.
Coming up next at number 3, we've got Acer palmatum Japanese Princess. And Japanese Princess is the first selection in America that had a variation on color like Macawa Yatsubusa. But it wasn't just the variation on color, it also has a variation on the leaf. So the leaf twists a little bit, which distinguishes it from Mayday when people think, oh, we've got some unusual weather occurrences. They may look similar on the spring color and those unusual weather patterns, but that foliage is very different in itself because Japanese Princess has that twisting foliage to it.
You can have variants on color in these. I mean, I have these all over my yard. I have Maydays and Mystics in the front yard and the backyard, and I'll get variation even between the front yard and the backyard each season on these. So it's not uncommon to have some variation. Now, Japanese Princess, you can change the color a lot of this one with sun or shade. Typically in heavy sun, you're going to get high intensity, Barbie pinks, right? I mean, everybody's watched the Barbie movie, right? You're going to get that bright neon pink. Like, that's the kind of pink you're going to get with sun. If you're giving it more shade, you're going to get kind of a yellow blonde with bright, soft pink overtones. So still intensely pink, but a little bit different aesthetic. So this one's excellent for the container garden. Slightly faster growing than Tattoo, but it is in that smaller range for Makawas. It's definitely going to be a lot slower growing than most of the other Makawas on this list. I listed it around 3 to even 4 feet, even in 10 years. Nice density to it. Distinctly different. So once you let these mature out, you'll see that difference in leaf size. Typically, Japanese Princess is going to even have larger foliage than Mayday or Mystic or some of these others on the list. So it's a little bit more distinguishable that way. One thing that's interesting about this one is a characteristic of it is it often gets this flaking variegation within it. And you can see that on Mayday too. A lot of times people will say, I have a variegated sport going on my Mystic or on my Mayday, sometimes on Mystic as well, or my Mayday and my Japanese Princess. And it's a reoccurring sport. I haven't seen that isolate and be viable, but it's something to always look at. But it is a common trait of Japanese Princess to have that flaking, swirling variegation in the leaf, especially if you've got it in some shade.
Another thing I've seen on older specimens of Japanese Princess, or really, really old specimens, is a little bit of like almost looking at like the graft where you start to see some like pine barking, which is unusual. I mean, I saw that on some 10 gallons. I saw that on some 15, 20 gallons before, and it's really unusual. It doesn't typically occur until a plant is probably 15, 20 years old. But if you see that, don't be surprised. That is something that we have seen in the past.
Anything with royalty in the name, especially Princess. My kids are always going to go check on a Japanese Princess. It's one that sells out here again very quickly on Mr. Maple because it's a great plant and it's quality. I mean, I think it's a plant that you can not be afraid to invest into. Once you get a bigger one, it's going to look so great in your landscape and garden. And it really just brings something different every season. So each season of the year, it kind of changes a little bit for you. Typically more reds, sometimes some oranges in it in the fall, but typically more reds for me to soft pinks. And just a showy overall plant, exceptional for a pot. I mean, you put this one in a blue patio planter or a different color pot that really shows off everything Japanese Princess can be. I think it's one of the quintessential versions of Macawa Yatsubusa for a good reason.
Coming at number 2, Acer palmatum Kryptonite.
This is a great one, guys. Now, this was named Kryptonite because when I saw it, I got weak in the knees. I mean, I was like, I'm like Superman. I have to divert my eyes and put my hands up from the glowing Kryptonite. This was one that we didn't actually find the tree, but we put the name on it. So we named Kryptonite here at our nursery. Another tree that was found as a sport at Metro Maples. Keith Johansson had the original Kryptonite growing on a large Macawa Yatsubusa. Now, Keith said this thing is going to be, insane to graft. He said this thing's going to be a mess. He actually got me some soundwood, and I grafted it, and the original sport did die off on the tree, so it didn't retain that trait. The more vigorous part of the Mikawa took over. The original Kryptonite on the broom, or the sport, is no more, but luckily we saved those traits. for me, it's probably the best variegated Makawa form. I love what it does. It's going to leaf out and look kind of green. So when it first leaves out, you kind of get a little swirling on it. As that matures into a little bit, even into the summer color, I think it almost gets some like Manny Sato like vibes. It's like lime green on dark green and just really cool.
You stole the words right out of my mouth, man. That's exactly how I'd describe it. With that elongated foliage, with that edging, with that unique, I mean, every leaf is different. I mean, everything that people love about Manny no Sato, Village of 10,000 Leaves, and that's exactly what you get with Kryptonite on a Macawa Yatsubusa style. That lime green on dark green, I mean, very unique, very different. I mean, this tree is going to rock it out as soon as we start listing it on MrMaple, which is coming pretty soon again.
Yeah, this one's going to be out there. We're working on getting some decent numbers so that when it does hit, everybody's not just mad at us for 2 years, then we don't have it. So what we try to do is keep enough trees to continue to produce from it. And we're starting to get to a point where that's viable. Kryptonite really, really shows out, though. It's got some yellows to oranges in it in the fall. It's not uncommon for that wider part of the leaf to have a little bit more yellow to it. Really great overall plant. Tends to grow a lot like Mikawa with that high density, putting on a lot of new branching going on in there. Very compact tree to it. Really showy. And I think interestingly enough, that early summer time frame may be my favorite period for this one. So it's a little past the spring flush. Everything else, like, you know, it's about the time when it looks its best is about the time your mystics are starting to lose a little bit of their orange. And that's when this one's really starting to shine. So it really stands out to me in that early summer garden.
Now, for a variegated Macawa Yatsubusa, this one has been fairly vigorous for us in 1 gallon.
I've grown it in full sun here in zone 6B for many years now, and it's done excellent on the sun durability as well.
So this is a plant that I think everyone's going to love. It's going to be easy to grow, and it just gives you a unique color constantly throughout the season, and it gives you good fall color as well. So, I mean, amazing plant with Kryptonite.
All right, guys, number 1, any guesses? We're going with Red Panda. So Red Panda is an introduction here at MrMaple. Really nice, dark red Macawa Yatsubusa form. For us, we've went through, I told you we went through like 50 pounds of seed one year. We've probably evaluated well over 300 forms of red Macawa Yatsubusas. So we've went through at least 300 of them that we've set back, we've grafted, we've evaluated them. Red Panda stood out as the champion amongst all of them.
Yeah, and it really has that darker to bright red color in the early spring, and it just grabs your attention and holds that color long throughout the season. And the thing that's amazing about this is it starts to fade, but it still has some red color on it late spring. And then the summer flush starts happening where you get that bright red color coming back across it again during the summer.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the best pairings with Mystic, with Mayday, with Japanese Princess. It fits those other color variances perfectly. I mean, I think it really adds to what you can have in that Macawa Yatsubusa style. A little bit of a MrMaple exclusive. We did name this one here. I was walking around the WNC Nature Center with my kids when I was watching this seedling one day, and they had red pandas there in the garden. I was like, Red Panda. That's a good name. So that's where that one creeped in. It's getting a bit legendary. I know people have been waiting on this one for a while. People are like, does a red panda even exist? It's coming. Again, we're building enough numbers that when we do release this, we'll be able to keep more people happy and more people happy for longer because we'll have stock plants for it not to drop off after that first year. We'll be able to sustain a high level of production on this one. Starting to get some really nice plants in this one. The original one did get taken out by a weed eater. I always let people know, watch out for weed eaters. Somebody in the comment section under one of our top 5 tips was like, really? People are going to hit it with a weed eater? I'm like, man, I just lost like my favorite tree in my garden to a weed eater. So yes, really. Had somebody weed eating and they come up and took it out. But remember, Red Panda is going to be coming back, and I think it's going to be one that's going to be highly sought after. But we're going to get some decent numbers going in this one.
I know Brian Rule is one of the first red pandas that got out of MrMaple, and he works for MrMaple, so I mean, it's not really that out. But in his garden, he was talking about how right now it's got red new growth flushes, and the older growth has went to like a yellowish color, and so he's getting like these two-tone colors, just kind of like a red panda's face. And I was like, that sounds really awesome. I mean, red panda is for us the pinnacle of red Macawa Yatsubusas. And for us, it's held the best and keeps putting on red color better than any other red Macawa Yatsubusa style that we've seen.
So far, Bazinga's probably been number 2 if we're just talking about red forms. but it has out-achieved that in color and in length of red. So it's been the last one to hold its color. It's been a little darker in the early spring too. One interesting thing about a red Panda, and we're trying to isolate this trait as well, but you get some leaves inside your red Panda that almost look like a purple ghost. So it's got these weird little reticulates, kind of like what I was talking about with that variegation that goes on. So I don't know if this isolates out and remains. I've got a few that look more like that than others, so I'm keeping a real close eye on them. But it has a little bit more like swirling reticulation in some leaves. You can see it there in the original one. It had a big branch of that, and we have grafted that specific spot, hoping to see if we can isolate that trait. But really cool plant. And I think it's going to be one that, be worth the wait. I think a lot of people are like, oh, really? Does this even exist? It's going to be worth the wait when you get it. Red Panda.
So a recap of our top 5 really looks like the best orange, number 5, Mystic Mikawa. The best apricot, number 4, Mayday. The best pink, number 3, Japanese Princess. The best variegated form, Kryptonite. And the best red Panda, number 1.
I think you're going to enjoy these. I know a lot of people haven't grown red Panda and Kryptonite yet, but we have them high on the list for a good reason. We went through so many Makawa variances looking for the best unique traits. And these are our top 20, guys. Let us know if we hit it out of the park with this one, or if you completely disagree. If you completely disagree, hey, it's okay to be wrong. A lot of people are wrong in life, but this is the top 20 we came up with. And I hope you enjoy, a weekly talk show about Japanese maples. It lets us express our passion on this stuff for you guys. And I hope it's something you'll want to tune into regularly. We drop this podcast every Saturday in audio form on all major podcast platforms. And we put a video component out every single Sunday at 8 p.m. That's a lot of work. We got a whole team here working on these. Sean's over there playing the guitar right now. Not really, but he puts those awesome guitar intros in for our podcast. But we've got a whole team here making this possible. We hope you'll subscribe and be part of what we're doing.
And as always, if you want to support us, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform, but also remember to shop with us on MrMaple.com.
Those guys sponsor a lot of our videos, and they're awesome.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.